So a fish sits in a bucket on the ground. No filter, no heater, no oxygen stone. Every other fish in that bucket would be dead by morning, but this one isn't. That survival is usually framed as impressive, but it shouldn't be. It's a warning. If you don't want your fish to die, subscribe and you'll also help feed this little guy. Because when a fish survives conditions that kill everything else, the real damage doesn't happen in the bucket, it happens in the expectations people carry back to their own tanks. The fish that shouldn't survive. Snakeheads don't look magical. They don't glow, they don't hum when danger approaches. They just keep existing in places where they shouldn't. I'm talking about low oxygen water, stagnant ponds, floodplains that dry into mud, transport tubs that turn into warm soup. A lot of fish hit those conditions and quietly disappear, but snakeheads linger, sometimes for days, sometimes long enough to make people uncomfortable. This gets framed as toughness, or defiance, or nature being dramatic for clicks. What's actually happening is less cinematic and more unsettling. Snakeheads aren't winning, they're enduring. They're burning through biological reserves that most aquarium fish never had access to in the first place. And when people watch that endurance, they don't see the cost. They see permission. Here's what snakeheads actually have that other fish don't. Snakeheads breathe air, not as a party trick, but as their infrastructure. They have suprabranchial organs, structures that let them pull oxygen directly from the atmosphere when the water stops cooperating. That alone changes everything. Oxygen stops being a hard ceiling and becomes a variable they can work around. Most aquarium fish, though, live on a narrow oxygen margin. When dissolved oxygen dips, stress rises immediately. Their gills strain, their metabolism falters, and the damage accumulates fast. But snakeheads carry a wider margin. When water oxygen drops, they don't panic. They just switch lanes. That margin shows up elsewhere too. Their metabolism is flexible. So when they're under stress, they can slow things down, conserve their energy, and tolerate swings that would shred a more specialized fish. They aren't optimized for comfort. They're built for interruption. This doesn't make them healthier, it makes them harder to kill quickly. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Here's why snakeheads are so confusing to aquarium keepers. People watch a snakehead survive filthy water, temperature swings, and oxygen crashes. Then they look at their own tank. Clear water, filter humming, test kit numbers behaving, but the fish is dead anyway. The conclusion feels obvious. If that fish can live through a nightmare, why didn't mine survive a tank that looked fine? So we blame shifts, bad luck, weak genetics, a sensitive species, anything except the system itself. Snakeheads actually distort perspective. They turn survival into a visual lie. They make extreme stress look manageable. They make endurance look transferable. It's like watching someone jog on a broken ankle and deciding knees are optional. Survival mode versus stability. This is the big difference between snakeheads and other fish. Snakeheads operate well in survival mode. That's the trick. Survival mode is loud, visible, and dramatic, but stability is quiet. Most aquarium fish aren't designed to enter prolonged survival mode. So when oxygen dips, when waste accumulates, when bacterial balance wobbles, they don't flip a switch. They just absorb the damage. Gill tissue scars, immune system stretch thin, and metabolism runs hot when it should be steady. But the fish keeps eating, it keeps swimming, it looks fine, and then it dies later. I'm talking days, weeks down the line, sometimes after the tank finally looks like it's fixed. Snakeheads, though, skip that arc. They bypass some of the damage pathways entirely by stepping outside the water's rules. They don't prove the system is safe, they just prove they don't rely on it in the same way as other fish. Watching that and drawing comfort from it is how delayed deaths get written off as mysteries. This is the dangerous lesson that people take away from snakeheads that I don't want you to get out of this. This is where things go wrong. Snakeheads teach people that suffering is survivable, that stress is negotiable, and that if one fish can push through, others should be able to try harder. Aquariums become endurance tests instead of ecosystems. So your water changes get sloppy, the oxygen becomes an afterthought, and stocking density creeps up. Feeding mistakes even linger. Everything feels justified because something, somewhere, survived worse. But most fish don't carry spare margins. They live close to the edge by design, not because they're more fragile, but because evolution shaped them for stable environments, not chaos in your tank. When those fish die, the tank gets blamed, or the species, or fate. The real culprit, though, is the lesson learned from the wrong survivor. Okay, here's the part I had wrong about hardy fish like the snakehead, okay? I used to respect hardy fish. I treated that label like it's a big compliment. Hardy meant forgiving, safe, beginner-friendly, a buffer against mistakes. That belief, though, fell apart the longer I watched tanks fail quietly. The fish labeled toughest weren't thriving, they were just tolerating. And tolerance hid problems long enough for damage to compound. Snakeheads forced the realization. They aren't examples of success, they're examples of how far a body can bend before breaking. Hardiness doesn't fix unstable systems, it just masks them. Once that clicked, a lot of random aquarium deaths stopped being so random. Here's the big takeaway. This is what snakeheads reveal about aquarium failure. Snakeheads expose the difference between oxygen margin and survival margin. Oxygen margin is what keeps a system healthy. Survival margin is what lets something cling on when that system collapses. Most aquarium failures aren't dramatic crashes. They're slow suffocations. Tiny deficits stacking up while everything else looks fine. But snakeheads float above that mess, breathing air, waiting it out. Other fish sit inside it, absorbing every fluctuation. So when they finally die, the tank seems innocent. The water looked clean, the filter runs, and the lesson gets missed. Snakeheads don't break biology. They obey it with extra room to spare. And watching them survive teaches people the wrong rules. If that feels uncomfortable, it should, because the same misunderstanding sits behind most tanks that suddenly fail. There's another video that digs into what happens once a system crosses that line and it can't be undone. That's what the aquarium mistake you can't undo is all about, so check it out. I'm Art Gills, and I'll see you in the next one.